Hello, and welcome to Ancient Tale Weaver. I want you to do a quick exercise. Close your eyes. When I say the name Hades, what do you see? I would be willing to bet you see a demon. You see red skin, horns, a pitchfork, and a cackling laugh as he tortures the souls of the damned. You see the devil, Satan, the ultimate evil. But what if I told you that this image is completely and totally wrong? It's a modern invention, a product of centuries of confusing Greek myth with Christian theology. The real Hades, the Greek one, was something far more complex and, I think, far more tragic. He wasn't the god of evil. He wasn't the god of punishment. He was simply the god of the dead. He was the god of finality. He was the inevitable. He was the wealthiest god because all things, all mortals, all gold, all treasures eventually return to the earth, his domain. He was the unseen, the unheard, the unwanted king who ruled a silent, grey and joyless kingdom. Not because he chose to, but because he was forced to. He didn't cause death that was Thanatos. He didn't judge the dead that was King Minos and his brothers. Hades was just the warden, the grim, dutiful, and profoundly lonely jailer of a prison that held everyone and from which no one could ever escape. I find him to be the most misunderstood, the most tragic, and the most dutiful of all the gods. His story isn't one of ambition, it's one of acceptance. To understand the god of the underworld, you must first understand the child who was born into darkness. His story doesn't begin with a quest or a war. It begins with an act of cannibalism. As I told you in our story of the Titanomachy, the cosmos was ruled by the Titan king, Cronus. And Cronus was cursed. He was living under a prophecy that he would be overthrown by his own children. His wife, the goddess Rhea, gave birth to their first child, a son, the rightful heir to the cosmos. His name was Hades. But Cronus, in his paranoid madness, saw only a threat. He seized the newborn and he swallowed him whole. This is the single most important and most horrifying fact of Hades' entire existence. I want you to think about this. Zeus was the lucky one. He was hidden away, raised by nymphs on Crete, fed on honey and divine milk. He was raised in the light. Poseidon, depending on the myth you read, was either also swallowed or, in some versions, hidden among the lambs and raised by the Telchians. But Hades, all myths are clear. He was first. He was the first victim. His entire childhood, his entire existence was spent inside his father, trapped in the cold, acidic, dark stomach of a tyrant. He was not raised in the light. He was not raised with love. He was born into a prison. One by one, he was joined by his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Poseidon. They, too, were swallowed. They were a family, reunited in a living tomb. They were gods, so they could not die. They were just trapped. Can you imagine what that does to a mind? To spend your entire formative existence in a lightless, hopeless, terrifying void, this, I believe, is what made Hades. He didn't choose the dark. He was born into it. He is not a god of joy, like Apollo, or a god of passion, like Zeus. He is a god of patience, of grim, silent, stoic endurance. He is a god who knows that all things end. He is the ultimate realist, because his entire childhood was an endless, living death. And then, after an eternity, rescue. The youngest brother, Zeus, the one who had escaped, returned. He tricked Cronus, he fed him the emetic, and the great vomiting began. One by one, the gods were reborn, fully formed into the light. And Hades, the first one in, was the last one out. He emerged, a fully grown god, into a world he had never seen. A world of light and colour and sound. And what was the first thing he was asked to do? Fight the Titanomachy, the 10-year war. Now, I find his role in this war fascinating. Zeus was the charismatic general, the wielder of lightning. Poseidon was the brute force, the earth shaker. But Hades, he was the shadow. He was the spy. He was the one who had been trained by the darkness. His great moment came when Zeus freed their other uncles, the Cyclopes. The Cyclopes, in their gratitude, forged the gods their divine weapons. To Zeus they gave the thunderbolt, to Poseidon the trident, and to Hades they gave the most subtle, and I think the most fitting, weapon of all. They gave him the Hades Kylin, the helm of darkness, a cap forged from the shadows themselves that would make its wearer completely invisible. Hades, the god who had been unseen, trapped in darkness, was now given the power of that same darkness. And he used it. While his brothers made all the noise, Hades, the invisible god who would slip behind the Titan lines, he was the one who stole Cronus's weapons before the final battle. He was the one, and Hapers, who gathered intelligence. He was the silent, unseen, vital assassin in the war. He was crucial to their victory, and in the end, they won. The Titans were defeated. They were cast down into Tartarus. The war was over. The cosmos was theirs. And now, I come to the most tragic moment of his entire story. The moment that defines him. The moment of the drawing of lots. The three victorious brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, stood to divide the universe. They would not, could not, let one rule all. They would let fate decide. They would draw lots for the three great realms, the sky, the sea, and the unseen, the underworld. I want you to really think about this. Hades is the eldest. By all rights of primogeniture, he should have been High King. He was the rightful heir of Cronus, but he was not. He was just one of three. They placed the lots in a helmet. Zeus, the youngest, the saviour, drew first. He drew the sky, the heavens. He would be the High King. Poseidon, the middle brother, drew second. He drew the sea, a vast, chaotic, powerful kingdom of his own. And Hades, the eldest, the firstborn, the one who had suffered the longest in the dark, he was left with the last remaining lot, the one neither of his brothers wanted, the dregs, the underworld. I cannot overstate what a betrayal this is. He had fought a 10-year war to escape one dark underground prison, only to be rewarded with another. Zeus got the bright, sunlit sky, the home of all the other gods, the place of feasts and music and love. Poseidon got the vast, beautiful, powerful ocean full of nymphs and life and adventure. And Hades got the basement. He got the dark, the cold, the end, he was given a kingdom where nothing ever happens. His subjects were not subjects. They were shades, whispers, memories. He was the king of dust. And I think in that moment, something in him just broke. He did not rage like Poseidon would have. He did not plot like Zeus would have. He just accepted. It was his dharma, his fate. He was the grim, dutiful eldest son, and so he went. He turned his back on the light. He turned his back on Olympus, and he descended alone into his new kingdom, the kingdom he would almost never leave again. He became the unseen, the one the other gods and never spoke of. They would feast, they would have affairs, they would play games, and he would rule. He would guard the gates of death. He would keep the shades in. He would keep the order of the cosmos. He was the most important god, the god of consequence, and he was the most alone. This, I believe, is the true tragedy of Hades. He was the only god who was truly faithful. He was the only king who never cheated on his wife. But to get that wife, he too would have to break his own rules and commit the one great sin of his eternal life. Hello, and welcome back. When I left you, the great drawing of lots was complete. Zeus had won the sky, Poseidon had won the sea, and Hades, the eldest son of Cronus, the firstborn, the first victim, had been given his prize. He was made king of the Underworld. He turned his back on the light of Olympus, and he descended alone into his new permanent prison. So, what was this kingdom? I think this is the most important part of his story. When we think Underworld, we think of hell, we think of fire, of torture, of demons. But the Greek underworld was not that. It was worse. It was nothing. It was a vast, grey, cold, joyless, misty kingdom where nothing ever happened. It was the kingdom of finality. It was divided by 5 great rivers: the Styx, the river of unbreakable oaths; Acheron, the river of pain; Cocytus, the river of wailing; Phlegethon, the river of fire; and Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. When the dead, the shades, arrived, they were just pale whispers. They were memories, shadows with no substance. They were led by the god Hermes to the banks of the Styx, where they met the first great guardian of this realm, Charon, the grim ferryman. He would take them across, but only if they could pay. A coin, the obol, placed under their tongue at their funeral. If they had no coin, they were doomed to wander the banks as ghosts for 100 years. Once across, they met the second guardian, the one we all know, Cerberus, the 3-headed, or in some myths, 50-headed, a hound of hell, a monstrous, savage beast with a mane of living snakes. But I find his job fascinating. Cerberus was not there to keep people out. He was a guard dog. He was there to keep the dead in. He was the perfect, loyal, terrifying jailer. And then the souls would be judged, not by Hades. He was the king, the administrator. The judgment was done by 3 other dead kings, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. And most souls were neither good nor evil. They were just average. And so they were sent to the Asphodel Meadows, an endless, grey twilight field of grey flowers, where they would just wander forever, a boring eternity. The truly wicked, the Tantaluses, the Sisyphuses, they were cast into Tartarus, the deep pit, for eternal torment. And the truly heroic, the Heracleses, the Achilleses, they went to the Elysian Fields, a small, sunlit paradise, a tiny, perfect corner of the underworld that Hades could see, but never visit. This was Hades' kingdom, a lightless, soundless, joyless, grey prison. And he was the warden. He sat on his black obsidian throne with his dog, Cerberus, at his feet. And he just ruled. He was the most important god. She was the one who kept the order of the cosmos. He kept the dead. He was the god of consequence. While his brothers Zeus and Poseidon were up on Olympus, or in the sea living, they were feasting, they were laughing, they were having affairs, they were starting wars, they were messy. Hades was not. He was dutiful. He was silent. He was alone. He was the most powerful king and the most lonely being in all of creation. He had a kingdom, but he had no queen. He had power, but no partner, no goddess, no one would ever willingly live in the land of the dead. He was the unseen, the unwanted, and I think after millennia of this silence, this duty, this isolation, the god who had been born in the dark finally broke. He fell in love, or perhaps he was made to fall in love. The story is complex. He saw her, Persephone, the Kore, the maiden, the daughter of his sister Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. She was his perfect opposite. He was the king of the dead, of the finality of winter. She was the goddess of spring, of flowers, of new life. She was light. He was darkness. And he, in his eternal, crushing loneliness, wanted her. He became obsessed. Now, I find this part fascinating. In some myths, he just sees her, but in others, the real instigator is Aphrodite, the goddess of love. She was angry that her power did not touch the underworld, that Hades was the one god immune to her. So she sent her son Eros, and Eros shot the king of the dead with his most powerful golden arrow, the love that Hades felt was not just love. It was a divine madness, a wound, a curse. He had to have her, and here he commits his one great sin. But I want to be clear, he does it like a king. He does not assault her. He first goes to her father, his brother, Zeus. He ascends to Olympus. A rare, terrible event. He stands before the king of the gods. Brother, his voice echoes, I am lonely. I have a kingdom, but no queen. You have many daughters. Give me one, he asks, for Persephone. And Zeus, the great politician, is trapped. He cannot say yes because he fears Demeter. Demeter would never allow her daughter of light to be queen of the dark, but he also cannot say no to his brother, the king, who rules half the cosmos. So Zeus does what he always does. He avoids. He makes a coward's pact. Brother, Zeus says, I cannot give her to you. But, and this is the key, *I will not stop *you from taking her. It was divine permission, a sanctioned abduction. Hades had his leave. He, Emene, returned to his realm. And he waited. He waited for the moment. Demeter was away. Persephone was in a meadow gathering flowers with her nymphs, and Zeus fulfilled his pact. He made the earth, Gaia, create a lure, a flower, a Narcissus, so beautiful, so magical, dot, with 100 blooms, that Persephone gasped. She wandered away from her protectors. She was alone. She reached down to pluck the flower, and the instant her fingers touched the stem, the ground erupted. A black chasm split the earth, and from Takeline it he came, Hades, in his midnight black chariot, pulled by 4 shadow black horses. He did not stop. He leaned. He seized the screaming goddess and pulled her into the chariot. Mother, she screamed, and he drove the chariot back into the earth. The ground slammed shut. She was gone. Now, this is where the modern interpretation and the ancient differ. The modern story is one of abuse, but I find the ancient Greek version to be far more interesting. Hades did not drag her to a dungeon. He brought her to his palace. He did not chain her. He crowned her. He made her his queen. I want you to really grasp this. Zeus had countless affairs. Poseidon had hundreds. Every other god was profoundly unfaithful. Hades never was. He was the only true monogamous husband in the entire pantheon. He didn't just want a possession. He wanted a partner. He gave her power. He shared his kingdom with her, and Persephone changed. She was no longer the Kore, the maiden. She became dread Queen Persephone, the mistress of the Underworld, the only one the Shades truly feared. She found her power in his darkness, and he, for the first time in his eternal existence, was not alone. He had his queen. He had his wife. He, I believe, was happy, but I forgot about the world above. Demeter, his sister, heard the scream. She returned. The meadow was empty. Her daughter was gone. Her grief was absolute, as we explored in the Persephone story. She lit her torches. She searched. She learned the truth from Helios. She learned of Zeus's betrayal, and her grief turned to rage. She went on strike. She abandoned Olympus. She sat in her temple, and she withdrew her power from the earth. The crops failed. The trees died. The animals starved. The first great winter began. Mankind was dying, and Zeus panicked. His sacrifices stopped. He sent messengers. Hera, Apollo, Athena, Demeter refused. Them all. I will not let one seed sprout. She vowed, until I see my daughter again. Zeus was beaten. He had to break his pact with Hades. He summoned Hermes. Go, he commanded. Go down to my brother and tell him he must give her back. Hermes flew. He arrived in the throne room. He gave the message. And Hades, I imagine his heart broke, betrayed again by Zeus. The one thing he ever asked for was being taken away. He looked at Persephone. She wanted to see her mother. He was trapped. He could not defy Zeus. I obey, he said. You may go, my queen. Is less than next image, is greater than. But before you leave, surely you are hungry. And Hades, named, I believe in this moment, proves he is just as clever as Zeus. He offers her a pomegranate, the fruit of the underworld, and Persephone, joyful, innocent, not thinking, she takes it and she eats. She eats 6 seeds, a tiny act, but it was enough. She had partaken of the food of the dead. She was now bound by the most ancient law of all. Hades knew he had her. He had won. He let Hermes take her back. He knew she would return. Hello, and welcome back. When I left you, the universe was at a standstill. Demeter, in her grief, had frozen the world, and Zeus, his hand forced, had sent Hermes to the underworld, ordering Hades to release his new queen, Persephone. Hades, the dutiful king, trapped by his brother's command, had to obey, but he was clever. In a final, desperate, and brilliant act, he offered his wife one last taste of his kingdom, a pomegranate, and she, in her joy and innocence, ate 6 seeds. She was now, by the most ancient of laws, bound to his realm, whether she knew it or not, and so Hades, his face a mask, let her go. Hermes, the messenger, guided her up, up out of the dark into the light. She returned to the world of the living. She found her mother, Demeter, a hollow shell, sitting in the dark temple at Eleusis. "Mother!" she cried. Demeter's head snapped up. She saw her daughter, alive, whole, her light. Music explodes with joy and life, and the instant, the very second, they embraced. The world healed. I want you to picture this. A great warm golden wave of energy exploding from the goddess, the snow vaporized, the ice cracked, the dead brown grass instantly turned a vibrant, living green. The bare, skeletal trees burst into leaf and flower. The frozen seeds sprouted. The great famine was over. Spring had returned. Life had returned. Demeter was joyful. She held her daughter, weeping. "You are back. You are safe," she sobbed. "I will never, ever let you go again." She was happy for a moment. But then she was the goddess of wisdom too. A cold, terrible suspicion entered her heart. She pulled her daughter back. "My child," she said, her voice suddenly terribly cold. "Tell me the truth. Swear to me. Did you eat anything in that dark place?" Persephone, her joy, faltered. She was an innocent. She didn't know the law. "No, mother," she said. I was so sad. I couldn't eat anything." "Oh," Demeter's face froze. "Oh, what?" Persephone looked at her hands. "Well, nothing," she stammered, "except just at the end, Lord Hades, he gave me a pomegranate. I was so happy to leave. I just ate a few seeds. 6. I think only 6. Music. A low, terrible, discordant drone. The sound of a world breaking. Demeter let go of her daughter. She staggered back. "No," she screamed. A sound of pure despair. She knew the ancient law. You ate the food of the dead. The world, which had just burst into flower, froze. The leaves began to wither again. "Zeus," Demeter roared at the sky. "You tricked me. This is not justice." The gods panicked. The famine was returning. Zeus had to intervene. He flew down. Hades rose from the earth. Demeter stood, her face a mask of rage. The 3 great siblings stood in the dying field. He tricked her, Demeter screamed at Hades. She, 80, my fruit, Hades roared back. She is my queen. The cosmos was at a standstill, and finally Zeus made his judgment. The great compromise. How many seeds? He asked. Persephone, weeping, held up her hand. 6. Then so it shall be, Zeus decreed, for each seed you ate, you will spend 1 month of the year with your husband. He pointed to Hades. 6 months you will be queen of the dead. He turned to Demeter. And 6 months you will be with your mother as maiden of the spring. It was done, and so the seasons were born for 6 months of the year, spring and summer. Persephone walks the earth. Her mother Demeter is joyful. The world blooms. The crops grow. Life is good. But then the time comes. Persephone must return to her other throne. She says goodbye. She descends, and Demeter begins to mourn. The leaves turn brown. The world grows cold. This is autumn, and then the snow falls. The land sleeps. This is winter. The whole world grieves with her, waiting for the return of spring. Hades, in his own way, won. He got his queen. He got his wife for half of eternity. And I think in some strange way, so did she. She was no longer just the innocent girl in the field. She was now 2 things: the core and the dread. Queen, the goddess of life and death. She became *1 of the most powerful goddesses in the entire pantheon. And so Hades returned to his kingdom, but now he was not alone, For 6 months of the year, he had his queen, but his character never changed. He was still the warden, the dutiful king, and this is where I find his true nature is revealed, not in his sin, but in his rule. Look at his other myths. When the great musician Orpheus came down to beg for the soul of his dead wife, Eurydice, Hades, the implacable god, asterisk was moved. His iron cheek was wet with tears from the song. He agreed. He broke his own law. You may take her, he said, on one condition. Do not look back until you are both in the sunlight. And of course, Orpheus looked back. He failed. Hades was not cruel. He was testing faith, and Orpheus's faith was weak. Look at Sisyphus, the king, who twice cheated death. Hades hunted him down. He dragged him back, and he gave him his punishment to roll a boulder up a hill forever. Not because Hades asterisk was sadistic, but because Sisyphus had broken the most sacred law of the cosmos. He broke the barrier between life and death. Hades was restoring order, and my favorite example, when the arrogant heroes Theseus and Persephone stomped asterisk into his kingdom to kidnap his wife, Persephone, did Hades rant and rave like Zeus? No. He was calm. He was cold. He invited them in such a long journey. He said, "You must be weary. Please sit." And he tricked them. He trapped them on the chair of forgetfulness, fusing asterisk their flesh to the stone forever. It was an elegant, terrifying asterisk and perfect punishment. It was justice. In all of mythology, only 2 people ever tricked Hades, Persephone, with, to her loss of innocence, and Heracles, who wrestled Cerberus, asterisk, and dot asterisk, was so strong that Hades, impressed, asterisk, let him borrow his dog. Hades respects strength. He demands order. He is not evil. He is necessary. He is the balance. He is the king, asterisk. No one wanted to be but the one king. The cosmos, asterisk, could not survive without. He is the darkness that makes the light worth having